Feel the grip of the oar handle, smooth yet firm in your hands. Taste the salt of your own sweat and the occasional splash of water. It's all part of the journey. Welcome to another episode of Faster Masters Rowing Radio.
In this episode, we are going to be talking about major illness and training, and you will learn the adaptations that are possible should this misfortune happen to you.
Each week, our host, Masters Rowing Coach Rebecca Caro, dives deep into the world of Masters Rowing. Whether you're on the water or in the gym, join us to become a faster master. Let's go rowing.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Faster Masters Rowing Radio, where this week we have a suggested topic that came from a listener, which is about how do we deal with major illness and rowing. Now, I'm sad to say that I have had crewmates and friends who have suffered terrible trauma in their health, but have tried often to keep on rowing. And I can only applaud their desire and their grit, but also recognize that it is incredibly debilitating physically and mentally to be faced with something like a cancer, a stroke, some other sort of disease. Maybe you've got an atrial fibrillation. There are so many things that can happen. For many of us, we want to get out on the water. We like being there. We like the fact that it feels good to be outdoors. Of course, there is camaraderie and friendship in your crewmates. The challenge, of course, is really what is possible. And I did some research into this, and some of this information has come from people giving me advice about what happened to them, and others are observations from people that I've known personally. Let's talk about one particular scenario, which I've seen a couple of times, which is cancer treatment, where somebody has a situation where they're getting chemotherapy or radiotherapy, which is happening regularly. I'm not talking about surgery and post-surgical recovery. That tends to happen gradually. Doctors are often very strong on advising you how long you need to rest and how to come back gradually and things like that. And often rehabilitation, muscular rehabilitation and strength are advice that's given to you by physical therapists as well as surgeons. But when you have a major illness which has got some treatment like chemotherapy, it's often spaced out over time and you know the frequency and the recurrence. One of my friends found that obviously she felt awful after each session of chemotherapy, but that her feeling of well-being improved toward the end and before the next session. And so her solution was to go rowing immediately before she had to go to the hospital for the transfusion. And she could get in her single, and she said, I could go to the end of the river and back again. And then I would go to the hospital, at least feeling that I'd had a really nice outing, I'd been outdoors, that I'd enjoyed myself, and that I had a kind of lightness of spirit in order to approach, the fact that she knew she was going to end up feeling absolutely terrible after she had had the chemotherapy. And so for her, she rowed when she could, and she came and went with ease. And there was a really supportive friendship group in the rowing club who were available and made themselves available at the times when she was available, but also didn't stress or worry if a last minute cancellation was needed because she just wasn't up to it. So that was one approach to major illness and training. One of the other ones that was reported, which I read online, was someone saying they had had a stroke. And for them, they had recuperated well from the stroke, but there were some lingering physical restrictions, which they were still suffering. Which leads me to rowing with adaptations. And this isn't just something that applies to major illness sufferers. It applies to most of us masters rowers. As we age, our bodies are not working quite the way they used to, and so we need to row with adaptations. The stroke victim said, I can't grip a bow-side scull because when I put my thumb on the end of the handle, my hand tremors. So she gets vibrations in her hands, and they prevent squaring properly. Now, some of the advice that was offered included find an occupational therapist. They have lots of resources and lots of very good tips and tricks, including things like gloves that also bind to the handle so that your hand and the handle are as one. And a resource called adaptationrowinguk.com also had some good advice. Other suggestions with regards to para rowing, that perhaps rowing with pontoon floats so that you were safe and unlikely to fall in. Other suggestions including taking a pair of old grips home and practicing squaring and feathering with them, sitting in a chair and then perhaps holding your oars on either side of your chair, resting them on the arms of the chair or on a trestle or a sawhorse, so that you can just sit there and practice squaring and feathering. Someone else suggested baseball bat adhesive. Apparently there's grip adhesive that you can spray onto the bat of a baseball bat so that you can hold on to it better. And then an adaptation that was suggested by someone who actually suffered from arthritis, that instead of holding the oar with your thumb on the end, that actually the sideways pressure was made here with a little finger or the edge of their palm pushing rather than having the thumb on the end, that actually you row with a grip without your thumb on the end of the oar handle. So I thought those were all really interesting things that obviously each individual has to try for themselves and see whether whether it works for you. Another major impact on rowing was carpal tunnel, or a repetitive stress injury, which has a tendency to recur. And this person said that they held their oar handle with their thumb and their index finger curled around the end of the handle. So if this is the handle, they actually have the thumb and the index finger here on the end, and the other fingers hold the handle, rather than conventionally where you would have the thumb on the end and all four of your fingers on the handle. So that they said, what I do is I turn the oar with my middle and ring fingers. So these two fingers do the turning, and these are kind of almost resting, like they're not actually heavily holding on tight or heavily engaged with bonding onto the handle. So the key, I think, for any major illness, if you can come back to rowing, you will always be welcomed. Even if you sit in a boat and other people row you, you will have friends who will support you like that. There's an amazing lady who I meet regularly at regattas here in New Zealand who has bone cancer, and it's a terminal diagnosis, and she turns up at the regatta with a big smile on her face, and she just says, I am enjoying myself, and the people I row with know that, and I can't put much pressure on, but she said the joy of being here is what makes it worthwhile for me. And so in that context, I can only offer rowing with adaptations, supportive friends, and working out what is possible for you. But I sincerely hope that anyone who rows is able to keep their love of the sport despite health challenges. Till next time.
We are part of the Rowing Chat Podcast Network. Please tell your fellow rowers about the show. If you've learned just one helpful thing from today's episode, please consider supporting the show for as little as $1 per month by visiting fastermastersrowing.com/podcast.